Welcome, Hayaya brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining us today for this important briefing. Stand with Venezuela and Latin America. My name is Claudia Delof. I'm a member of WIPALA across the world and a councillor in Victoria Ward in the London Borough of Hackney. Over the last few days, we have seen the world order turn upside down with the kidnapping of the Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and the First Lady. After this, Trump has threatened neighboring countries, including Cuba, Colombia, Mexico, as he renews the Monroe Doctrine and turns it into the Donroe Doctrine. This evening, we ask ourselves, what can we do, both in this country and internationally? Before I introduce our speakers, I would like to remind everyone that on Saturday, there is a protest outside Downing Street organized by Venezuela Solidarity Campaign starting at 1 p.m. Finally, if you haven't yet, please sign up to the Peace and Justice Project newsletter and consider supporting PJP with a donation to continue to campaign on these and other important issues, both nationally and internationally. What's going to happen tonight is that we're going to hear from each of our speakers, and then we're going to move into a discussion. We're going to take some questions of the people that are watching us here in the UK and internationally, live on the YouTube channel. So please do feel encouraged to post any questions you have on the channel itself. As we know, there's been the killing of many people in these horrendous last few days for Latin America, Venezuela. So we're going to start with a minute silence before we hear from our first speaker. So we're going to start our minute silence now. Thank you, brothers and sisters. We'll proceed with our important briefing today. And may I just say before our first speaker, Dr. Francisco Dominguez, tell us what's happening and where we have gotten to now, may I send a massive and important greeting to the revolutionary people of Venezuela. Venezuela no está sola. Latin America will never be again a slave. Latin America will never be again a colony. Thank you, everyone. Francisco, we're so happy to have you here. We know of the extensive knowledge that you have on the region and Latin America and Venezuela. Please tell us where we are at today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very timely discussion meeting. What has been going on is the most disgusting, outrageous assault by US imperialism on the sovereignty of a nation that is trying to build a better society. That's an important dimension to it. This is not the end of the story. The fleet that was deployed, a massive fleet, 16 destroyers, the USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the history of humanity that can hold 75 to 90 F-35s, a nuclear submarine, loads of bombers, B-1, B-2, B-52, helicopters, and so on, plus deployment of military assets in Puerto Rico, Trinidad and Tobago, definitely in Guyana. I'm sure that there were preparations in Guantanamo Bay, and so on. They launched an assault against Venezuela, and they bombed 4 cities. In the operation, which they call Resolute Operation, According to their own information, 150 military aircraft participated. We do not know the number of soldiers, but definitely they attacked Miranda, Caracas, La Guaira, and Aragua. And the main targets were the military as well as civilian establishment. So in the process, they went even further, which I think it was intended to be a humiliation, to actually kidnap the president, which they managed to do, and his wife. The two of them, Nicolás Maduro Moros and Celia Flores, suffered serious injuries, significant injuries, is the official information. Apparently, Celia Flores had a few broken ribs, and it is feared that President Maduro has the same, also broken ribs. She appeared in court with a very swollen black eye, with Band-Aid around her face. Apparently, she was dragged from the floor, on the floor, to be taken away. From there, very swiftly, they were taken to the USS Iwo destroyer, and then from there, they were flown into New York. I'll come back to the question of the trial in a second. So the threat is still there. And then, very quickly, because it makes sense, it makes political sense, the institutionality of Venezuela began to work very quickly to normalize the situation as fast as they could. And through the Supreme Court, the National Assembly, and the armed forces, as well as the ruling party, which participated in this, they decided to appoint, to name Delcy Rodriguez, the current vice president, to become interim president. This is quite important legally and constitutionally, because when you replace the president completely and then he becomes full president, then you need to organize elections. So the point I'm making, which I think is a good one, is to say he's the only one. I'm going to be in charge temporarily as an interim one, and we will continue fighting until we get him back. So that's the position, and this was heavily and strongly supported by the armed forces. It was very well supported by the Supreme Court and all the other institutions of the state. The Council of State was also involved. So they call on the population to calm down, but to mobilize, to make sure that they protest and so on. President Donald Trump began to make threats, and he said the following, which I think he means it. He said, we will be running Venezuela from here, from Washington. And then he made a threat. He said, if she doesn't behave, or if they don't behave, then we might order a second strike, a second wave, which, is extremely ominous. And then worse than that, there was Marco Rubio, who in my view is the one that seems to have a very clear, much clearer strategy in terms of how to go to transform bit by bit through the pressure of US imperialism, Venezuelan society politically, in order to create the conditions what he calls a transition. Then they talked about that they're going to get, these 50 million barrels of oil which are being stuck in Venezuela because they couldn't sell them because of the blockade, the naval blockade, etc. So it is clear what they intend to do by military means and by pressure and by violence, by military violence of the most powerful, empire in the history of humanity. They intend to transform Venezuela into their colony. They would like to make it a protectorate, as they've done with some countries in the past in Latin America, through sheer gambit foreign policy. So if you look at what is going on inside Venezuela, as far as we can gauge, which I think is important to be aware of, there hasn't been any fracture that we are aware of in the military. And there hasn't been any fracture between the military and the civilian part of the leadership there. And there is not a single instance that we are aware of, that we follow things very closely, of opposition, manifestation, demonstration, or anything like that. Some of the mainstream media have interviewed some people who actually were hidden in the corner, being very dark, speaking very softly. We could see their faces. It makes no sense. We are here, we are supporting, we're very happy. But it's interesting also to register the fact that Donald Trump, when he was asked at the press conference, when he announced the kidnapping of President Maduro and his wife, whether he was going to install, that wasn't exactly the question, but that's what they meant, install Maria Corina Machado in power. And he made it totally clear, no, he said, because he's not respected in Venezuela and he has no support. Obviously, there is more to that statement, but that is an indication that the extreme right wing doesn't have any support. While all this is going on, there were demonstrations, huge demonstrations inside Venezuela in many cities. I wasn't able to actually watch all of them to have a better judgment, but it's clearly they are there. There is a very militant attitude. People are demanding, bring them back, and they're not going to rest until they bring them back. Let me make the final point, because I think it's good to contextualize this. This fits nicely. I don't want to say that word to use it, but this fits very perfectly with the National Security Strategy document that the United States issued on the 25th of November. I got the sense that they launched the attack, the deployment of the fleet and everything, and then later on they produced the document, which they had already in mind. And in that document, in page 5, says very precisely, we are going to ensure that this is our hemisphere. We are going to stop any malignant, external, non-hemispheric influence on authoritarian dictatorship that exists in the region, through which these malignant forces from external forces, they mean basically China, are actually making deals with these authoritarian regimes, these dictatorships, who are actually very nasty to everybody. That's sort of more or less the narrative. And they're taking over our resources, which is our oil, our lithium, our copper, our iron, and so on. And he says this is where the whole thing of the Monroe Doctrine comes in. They actually, in the document, in page 5, they call it the Trump corollary. There was the Monroe Doctrine on the 2nd of December, 1823, when he actually announced it, the President James Monroe, to the full Congress. And the basic idea was, the United States will not allow the Europeans to intervene. But then later on, they were able to have tremendous influence and control over the Caribbean. And as a result of that, President Theodore Roosevelt decided that he was going to use gunboat diplomacy. And he went for Panama, he went for the Dominican Republic, and then the United States went completely rogue, dominating, invading everything. I think Nicaragua got the worst of it. I understand that Nicaragua was being invaded 43 times. So that gives you an idea how bad it was. And this policy by Theodore Roosevelt, he called it, and everybody else called it, the Roosevelt corollary. So that's the point. The point is, we are going to go for the whole region, regardless. And the whole idea is to militarize everything they can, because the oligarchy, the ruling class that rules the United States, has drawn the conclusion they cannot win against multipolarity. Therefore, they will maintain their supremacy by military means. And that means war against anything and everything that is around. And Venezuela and Cuba happen to be on the front line right next to them. As the Mexicans say, Cuba and Venezuela, I think we could say, are very unfortunate because they're so far from God and so close to the United States. That is the context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And I think, as you rightly say, there hasn't been any fracture within the structure in Venezuela. And that really is the proof of the resilience of the Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian revolution. Something you point out, which I think is worth also sharing with comrades who are watching at the moment. I see hundreds of you online. Thank you for making the time here today to be with us and to also raise our voices for Venezuela and Latin America. The National Security Strategy, which was released on the 25th of November, which is such an important document to familiarize ourselves with. We're going to share a link where you point out, Francisco, that clearly the United States is keen to absolutely take domination on the region, I'm very willing, as we have seen, violating international human rights, which take us to hear from our next speaker, which we're also very, very fortunate to have here today, Oscar Guardiola-Rivera, who's a professor of human rights, political and philosophy studies at Birkbeck University. Oscar, the violation of international human rights is huge at the moment and is a huge concerning matter, especially as the UK is now complicit in doing this. So we're really keen to hear from you as to how we can also organize and the points that you feel are important for us to hear. Thank you, Oscar, and welcome. Bienvenido.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, very happy to be in this company, and most grateful to you, Claudia, to Laura, to Jeremy, to Peace and Justice for opening this space to allow Latin American voices themselves to be heard about this issue. Because if you notice, the mainstream media brings all sorts of analysts and opinion makers, but very rarely do they allow the voices of Latin America itself to be heard. And that's what I would like to do tonight in the next 5 minutes. On behalf of the people of Colombia, my fellow Colombians, on behalf of Colombians here in the community in London and elsewhere in Britain, on behalf of the Latino community here in Britain, it is very important that we realize that only if we gather together, only if we make our voices heard, only if we take action, we will be able to withstand the terrible show of force that we have seen in the last days. Let me say that if you perhaps forget everything that has been said or will be said tonight, it will be beautiful if you keep one word that comes from the long tradition, the long poetic literary tradition, the long continental tradition of Latin America, which we go to ask for counsel when we feel despair, when we feel that we are disoriented, as we feel right now. In that tradition, there is an important notion, and it is the notion that those who think that they can wield violence and force upon others and control it and domesticate it will always find out that that violence comes back to haunt them. This old notion was reconceived, reinvented by a group of Black poets from the Caribbean who witnessed the rise of fascism in Europe in the first part of the 20th century. They called it the boomerang effect, the shocking return of violence. Suzanne Césaire, Aimé Césaire, René Ménil, and after them Frantz Fanon realized that the rise of fascism in Europe, or its derivation, its reemergence now inside the United States, was connected to the violence that colonial powers, in this case the United States, was visiting upon its so-called peripheries, its so-called backyard. That kind of violence always returns, and it is not a coincidence that only a few days after we have seen this violence in Venezuela, and also directed against Colombia and against Mexico and against Brazil and the whole of the Caribbean, only days after that, that violence returns to the various streets of the United States itself. The assassination of a young woman in the streets of Minnesota is not disconnected, but actually it is intertwined with the kind of violence that the current US administration is visiting elsewhere. And we draw an important lesson from this. You might recall that poet who warned us against thinking that this kind of violence is always directed against somebody else because they are flawed somehow, because they are leftists, because they are black, because they are this or that. We tend to believe that that violence stays there. We tend to not to notice, to act as if it wasn't about us until the day that violence comes back to haunt us. Well, that day is here. That is exactly what is happening within the United States. The authoritarian derive that we are witnessing in the United States is part and parcel of the kind of claim of total dominion that Francisco spoke of. And let me finish with a second lesson that is also related to this idea that violence returns always to those who wield it. If there is a difference between the older Monroe Doctrine and the newer Monroe Doctrine, it has to do with the fact that the so-called backyard that the US is claiming dominion of is no longer solely to include Latin America. Europe is also included in this dominion. And we see it not only in the bogus claim of dominion over Greenland, which the Prime Minister of Denmark and Greenland both have rejected, but also in the way in which the United States has already been intervening in the political scene in various countries in Europe. I just came from Spain, where the support of the current United States administration for ultra-right parties, such as the Vox Party, is clearly visible. Now, of course, those parties, the parties of the right, are running around disoriented because all of a sudden Mr. Trump didn't do the deed for them. So it happens also here in the United Kingdom. We know who they are, and we know what we need to do. We need to vote well. We need to make better alliances to make sure that those in the ultra-right parties, in the and also those conservatives who are now clapping and celebrating what has happened in Venezuela, do not get to power. That is what we can do from here to make sure that what has happened in Venezuela does not happen also in Colombia, in Mexico, or here in Europe. And in that way, we also get together in alliance with our brothers and sisters within the United States who will also have to fight against this form of neo-fascism. Thank you.
Thank you. Oscar, my heart is full hearing you tell us of the importance of how we need to organize on the ground locally. And it really fills my heart to know, and to, as you say, it's so important that we Latinos, Latinas, brothers and sisters of the Abya Yala get these spaces. And that's why I'm always in constant awe of the Peace and Justice Project, of leaders like Jeremy Corbyn, who has no hesitation, absolute no hesitation to fight for our region, to fight for peace, and to fight for justice. I just wanted to add, before we go into our next speaker, our wonderful speaker, that here locally, and I really want to share this because I think you make an important point, Oscar, of the importance of knowing who we vote for, who represents us on those tables that make decisions about us. And here, I just want to add that here across the country, in Islington, in Hackney, and all over the UK, we are fighting back. In terms of migrant support, for example, we don't want to see what the US is doing with ICE deportations and the massive surveillance. We're fighting back, for example, Palantir coming to the UK, being introduced in the NHS, who's of course being privatized by this, complicit not only in the genocide of Palestinian people, but complicit in so many crimes here in the national government. Thank you so much, Oscar. I'm pretty sure when we come a little bit later, we're going to pick up questions from people and comments that they put in the chat. Please feel encouraged to do that. We're going to be sharing links to the campaigns that we're mentioning as well through this very important briefing and gathering of brothers and sisters. We're now going to go next to our wonderful speaker, wonderful comrade, Embajadora Cubana Ismara Vargas Walter. Ambassador, we are so happy to have you here today. We are, of course, concerned by the threats that this man is making about Cuba. We want to hear from you, the message for the people, and also how we can organize and support each other. Bienvenida, Embajadora.
Thank you, Claudia. I am very honored to join this session tonight. And also I take the opportunity to express our appreciation for Peace and Justice Project, and also to you, to Jeremy, and to Richard Bergen. We were following the debates in Parliament, which is a very important scenario as we speak. And we were very, very, very pleased when we heard their voices being raised in order to support Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba. As you mentioned, it's important for all of us to stick together and not to let others say what we are supposed to be saying, because we are the ones who know what is actually going on in our countries. So today, I address you not merely to defend a sister nation, but to sound the alarm regarding the total collapse of the international order that should protect us all, but is not happening. On January the 3rd, the US government did not just attack Venezuela. They shredded the UN Charter in an act of state terrorism. And we have to be clear when we speak about the facts. This is state terrorism. They launched a military invasion, bombing civil infrastructure and military installations. This aggression culminated in the criminal kidnapping of the constitutional President Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores. Let us be clear, this is not an intervention. This is a return to barbarism. It is a violent, desperate attempt to resurrect the Monroe Doctrine and treat Latin America and some other places around the world as a backyard for resource plunder. If the world accepts the kidnapping of a sovereign head of a state, then no nation is safe, and international law is dead. It is with profound sorrow that we share, and of course you are aware, the loss of 32 Cuban internationalists during this invasion. These men were in Venezuela on official missions, assisting a sovereign government. When the bombs fell, they did not flee. They stood their ground. They died honoring their duty, falling under US fire while defending the constitutional presidency of Venezuela. Our resolve in this sense is unbroken. As we have stated before, for Venezuela, as for Cuba, we are ready to give our own blood. Washington's objective to decapitate the Venezuelan state has failed. The government is operational. The chain of command and the resistance stand firm. We know the corruption of the US judicial system all too well, a system that imprisoned our own Cuban Five, also known as Miami Five, on falsified charges. The US possesses neither the moral nor the legal authority to judge or jail the leader of a sovereign nation. We demand the immediate and unconditional release of Nicolás Maduro and Cilia Flores. And in this sense, we are also very grateful for those voices in the UK, as we mentioned, MPs, trade unions, everybody, to help us shatter the media blockade that is whitewashing this crime. We should not allow them to get away with murder. We have to continue fighting. We have to continue telling the world the truth about what is going on in Venezuela and in all of our countries in Latin America. Let it be heard loud and clear in Washington. Neither the unhinged threats of Donald Trump nor the sickly obsession of Marco Rubio will make our people tremble. They make the historic mistake of confusing our vocation for peace with weakness. We have spent over 60 years facing down imperial arrogance, and we are not a people who kneel. If they believe that with bombs, blockades, or Cold War rhetoric, they will break our unwavering solidarity with Venezuela, they prove that for all their military might, they still understand nothing about the dignity of Cuba. Our decision remains one and only: homeland or death, patria o muerte, solidarity forever with Venezuela. Thank you.
Patria o muerte, venceremos. Hayaya Venezuela, hayaya Cuba. Thank you, Embajadora. Incredible words of resilience and hope and solidarity and protection of our region. Thank you so much. And as you say, we're not going to let the United States get away with this illegal invasion. We will never be again slaves to the United States, or will never be again a colony. Hayaya Cuba, hayaya Venezuela, hayaya Latin America. Thank you, Embajadora. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who's putting messages online. We're gonna be picking up on those messages, and we're gonna be sharing as well links to the petitions and the letters, including from your party as well, in the chat. We're now going to hear a special message that the Venezuelan ambassador has left for us today, which Francisco is going to read. Unfortunately, the ambassador Felix Plasencia hasn't been able to be with us today due to emergency trip, but we're here today with Francisco, who's going to read an important message for all of us here this evening. Francisco, thank you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. It is wonderful and very moving to see how much support there is to both the unprecedented levels of aggression against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I want to especially thank our dear friend and MP Jeremy Corbyn and his Peace and Justice Project for organizing this event, and all of you attending here to know the truth about Venezuela and denounce this new imperialist crime. Dear brothers and sisters, Venezuela suffered a flagrant violation of its sovereignty, a true crime that violated every aspect of international and deadly military assault, international law, and a deadly military assault on several Venezuelan cities, leading to substantial loss of life, that ended with the violent kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, both of whom sustained significant injuries and who were taken illegally to New York. The US Department of Justice has indicted them with totally false charges of drug trafficking and narco-terrorism. This fallacy is confirmed by the very US Department of Justice itself, that has just abandoned the claim the Cartel de los Soles is a real criminal organization. At the first appearance at the New York court, President Maduro said, "I am the president of Venezuela and I consider myself a prisoner of war. I was kidnapped in my home in Caracas. I'm an innocent, not guilty. I'm a decent man and I'm still president of my country." Trump is now claiming to be running Venezuela, has threatened that if Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, does not comply with US commands, it will have severe consequences. Trump was quoted to have said, "If they don't behave, we will do a second strike." This is a naked and brutal effort seeking to turn Venezuela into a colony. These actions are about regime change to take possession through piracy of the world's largest reserves of oil. What is being inflicted on Venezuela is a model to be unleashed by imperialism against the whole of Latin America and the Caribbean. These threats have also been made against Colombia, Mexico, and Cuba with land military strikes. The stakes are higher than ever. The US, facing severe economic decline, has issued an update of the Monroe Doctrine by which the US intends to exert total dominance over the whole of the Western Hemisphere by military might. What has Bolivarian Venezuela done to deserve this aggression? This aggression began in earnest when President Hugo Chavez was elected president in 1999. This means Venezuela has endured 27 years of imperialist aggression. Why? Is it because we drastically reduced poverty, or for massively expanded free of charge education at every level, or because with thousands of Cuban doctors provided free health care to well over 20 million Venezuelans, or because of the free meals to over 4 million school children, or for having built 4 million social housing for most of the population, all built during the worst period of sanction, or for setting up Petrocaribe to supply cheap oil under generous credit conditions to more than 13 Caribbean countries, or for Operation Miracle, a program that surgically restored the eyesight of over 4 million people from the whole of Latin America, free of charge, or because in Venezuela, 78% of the state budget is devoted to social expenditure in Bolivarian Venezuela. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have marched in our nation to express outrage and rejection for the brutal assaults on the country's sovereignty and to protest for the kidnapping of the president and to demand the immediate and unconditional release of their president. Upon assuming as interim president, Delcy Rodriguez said, "No external agent governs Venezuela." There has been worldwide condemnation of this aggression throughout the world with huge demonstrations and pickets everywhere. In the US itself, there has been mass activity in over 150 cities. There have been mass demonstrations in almost every important city in the whole world condemning this aggression against us. Therefore, I wholeheartedly thank the parliamentarians, trade unionists, the TUC, many organizations, and thousands of individuals for condemning US aggression against my country. Keep it up. No to war on Venezuela, no to war on Latin America. We demand the immediate release of President Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, on behalf of Felix Plasencia. Thank you.
Hayaya. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Francisco, for that very powerful message to us all this evening. We're now going to hear from our next speaker, which we are so fortunate to have this evening. Vijay, we're really keen to hear from you. I know that you have a special message for us. Can I just add as well that I've been absolutely impressed by your analysis and all the work that you do in the region. So thank you. As a Latinoamericana, I want to say thank you. Gracias, camarada. We want to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, it's really nice to be with you. I'm speaking to you from my office in Santiago, Chile, which knows one or two things about being destabilized by US imperialism. It's not a stranger to that. In fact, in a few weeks, we'll have a new president, Jose Antonio Cast, who's a great admirer of Augusto Pinochet. It's almost as if history goes forward and back at the same time. But I know that most of you who are watching this, thanks to the Peace and Justice Project, are in the United Kingdom. It's important, I think, for you to pause for a minute. It's very easy to say, Yankee did this, Yankee did that, Yankee once again behaved badly in Venezuela. 150 planes went in there, destroyed the electricity systems, destroyed the communication systems, snatched President Nicolás Maduro Moros, snatched Celia Flores, who's a member of the National Assembly. Yankee does this and that, but at the same time, in the same period, on the same day, British fighter jets and French fighter jets went and bombed Palmyra, Syria. No comment. Just a few weeks before that, the United States bombed Socorro State in Nigeria. And meanwhile, the genocide against the Palestinians, fully aided and abetted by the United Kingdom, and of course, participated by the United States, it continues. That genocide has never ended. This is not only Yankee doing this and that. This is the collective West. You got to wake up to that reality. The United Kingdom is as implicated in all these things because, after all, the United Kingdom's Bank of England seized Venezuela's gold, participated fully in this sanctions, suffocation campaign against Venezuela. And even though the United Kingdom might, pretend that it has a slightly different policy regarding Cuba, it actually doesn't. It honors secondary, tertiary sanctions. In our institute, we operate right now through three important categories. I want to share them with you very quickly. They really helped us understand what's happening. One of them was in a publication we had in 2024, exactly 2 years ago. The publication was called Hyper-Imperialism. What we argued was, as a consequence of the United States' loss of economic power around the world, it has gone to militarism as a way to exert its domination. United States spends more than $1 trillion per year on its military. No wonder it has the capacity to devastate a global South country like Venezuela. The first category is hyper-imperialism. No country in the world can contest the US's ability to blow up bridges. The US knows how to blow up bridges. It's forgotten how to build them. The second category is there's a new mood in the global South. People are talking back to the empire. Of course, Gustavo Petro, but the South Africans, the Namibians, even Anwar Ibrahim from Malaysia, very strong condemnation of the kidnapping of President Maduro and Celia Flores. There's a new mood in the global South, but the new mood is still weak. Mustn't exaggerate it. Concepts like multipolarity are extremely distorting. We don't live in a multipolar world. We live in a hyper-imperialist world in which there is a new mood in the global South. But the third concept is the rise of the far right of a special type. In Latin America, the pink tide that began with Hugo Chavez, our great commander, has been receding, and an angry tide is coming in its place. Javier Milei, the Bolsonaristas in Brazil, Daniel Noboa, Nabil Bukele, whether it's Jose Antonio Cast or it's the new Bolivian government. This is an angry tide. Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, they are being increasingly isolated. International solidarity of the left is imperative. The defense of the Cuban Revolution is imperative. The defense of the Bolivarian process in Venezuela, imperative. Without that, nothing. To lose these revolutionary processes is bad for the world, not only bad for Latin America. Trump and the hyper-imperialists in their national security strategy have made it clear. They want to clean the stables in the Western Hemisphere. They want to get rid of the Bolivarian process, overthrow the Cuban Revolution, and end the government in Nicaragua. That is what they want to do. That is what we have to fight. There are contradictions, many. We have to ride on the contradictions. We cannot be demoralized. We have to be absolutely resolute in our belief that we can prevail. The contradictions lead either to barbarism or to socialism. There's no other choice, friends. There is no other choice. Thanks a lot.
There's absolutely no other choice. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And on the words that you just said around, how the rise of the far right and how our pink tide in Latin America has been receding and the angry tide is rising. This is where, as you rightly say, it is so important that international solidarity is absolutely top agenda from all over the world, which ties us really nicely into the next speaker, who we know needs no introduction, but as a Boliviana, I want to say as well that in our recent coup d'etat in Bolivia, if it wasn't for the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, we wouldn't have been able to lead the international campaign as well that we led. And this speaks to what you were saying to us earlier about so important to bring international solidarity. So thank you, Vijay. And now we speak and we hear from Jeremy Corbyn, who will tell us, well, we're always willing to hear what you're going to tell us, Jeremy. Jeremy, gracias, compañero Jeremías. As he says, thank you so much always for the solidarity and always for standing up for Latin America. Hallaria, Jeremy, and we'll hear it from you. Thank you.
Claudia, muchísimas gracias para su intervención y su palabras ahora. The issues that we're faced with are absolutely enormous. And we're sitting here tonight in the Peace and Justice Project office in London, in Finsbury Park, which is a very poor area of London. And we're reaching out to the rest of the world. The Peace and Justice Project was set up to achieve international solidarity as well as solidarity within our own society. So a huge thank you to everyone that's made this call possible, particularly Laura Alvarez, who's our International Secretary, for what she's done, and all those that have spoken tonight, because we are in dangerous and very, very desperate times. When the news came that President Maduro had been kidnapped out of his presidential quarters in Caracas and taken to New York, I was amazed, astonished, in some ways not surprised, because we'd seen the build-up over the last few weeks of US forces within the region. We'd heard the language of Marco Rubio and we'd heard the language of Trump, and we'd seen the various analyses that are being made, and a refusal to look at the history of Venezuela, to look at the sanctions, to look at the way that Britain, yes, Britain, has retained a very large amount of Venezuelan gold in the Bank of England. And so for all the poverty and all the sanctions that exist in Venezuela, a lot of countries all around the world are complicit in that whole agenda that has done so much to impoverish people in Venezuela. And so the arrest of Maduro and now putting him on trial is part of a series of threats. This is 19th century, 18th century, whatever you want to call it. activities by the United States against the global South, but in this case, particularly against what they call the Western Hemisphere of South America. And so the threat has now been made and carried out against Venezuela. A new threat is being made of a second strike unless Venezuela kowtows to the USA and sells oil at the price that they want and allows the US to decide what products are bought with those proceeds and where that goes to. It is effectively putting Venezuela under a kind of special measures in influence and run by the USA. Not actually that different to some of the economic special measures that the poorest countries in the world have consistently been put under by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. And then the next threat that's made is obviously to Cuba. Cuba has been under sanctions ever since 1959. I remember as a 10-year-old, my mother telling me with great joy that finally the Batista regime was gone and the Cuban people would have a better time as a result. And here we are, all those years later. There is still sanctions against the people of Cuba, still the threat. What is the threat of Cuba to the United States other than a threat of example? A country that can provide education, housing, healthcare for the entirety of its population, something no other country in Latin America completely achieves at the present time, despite all the sanctions. That is the danger of Cuba, that threat of example. And wherever there is an earthquake, wherever there's a volcano, wherever there's a flood, wherever there's a disaster of some sort, the first doctors to be there are from Cuba. And so we should recognize and thank Cuba for all that it's done and stand by them under the new threats they're receiving. Likewise, Colombia is put under threat for exactly the same reason, because the government of President Petro has tried to move the economy into a more sustainable way, has tried to deal with the issues of poverty and inequality all across Colombia, and tried to do so much to improve the lives of ordinary Colombians. That, again, is a threat. What the US wants is, of course, the oil. What it wants is the natural resources. And as if Trump hasn't done enough, he then makes a direct threat to Mexico, a country that the US has constantly been threatening for the last 200 years. And so to the people of Mexico, we say solidarity. To the government of Mexico, we say solidarity. And we will stand by you as we'll stand by all the others that are under threat at the moment. And then Trump, if he's not done enough trouble in 1 week on Venezuela, then announces that he's going to take over Greenland without any obvious process or anything else. He just intends somehow or other to take over Greenland and say it will henceforth be part of the USA. I don't know if anybody of you can remember his inaugural address when he said he would be the president who would, for the first time for this century, expand the USA. See what it means now? We now understand that. So international law has been thrown away. Any kind of international order has been thrown away. The power of veto at the UN has been used and will be used again and again by the US to make sure that the Security Council doesn't and isn't able to do anything. We are in very dangerous and serious times. I ask you to cast your minds back to November the 30th of last year, when the United States produced its new national security strategy. I read this national security strategy very, very carefully over the Christmas break. I read every line of it. I looked at it very, very carefully. What I would say in its favor is it's better written than the stuff that Jesse Helms used to write. It's better written than the Project for a New American Century. And so it is more understandable in that sense. But it is brutally simplistic in everything it says. It asserts, one, the United States is the most powerful and greatest nation on the earth. Two, the USA, to maintain its position as the most powerful nation on the earth, doesn't want any more immigration. Quite odd, because I'm unclear about who's going to do all the work in the USA if there's no more immigration. And thirdly, that they need raw materials from around the world. And if the USA decides it needs raw materials, it will simply go and get them. Oil, cobalt, lithium, rare earths, you name it, they will go and get it. Hence the justification for the invasion of Venezuela. And it then has special messages for the whole of the Western Hemisphere, that is North and South America and the Caribbean to you and me. Any country that harbors what they call foreign influences, whatever that means, but I think I know what it means, will be subject to special attention, and the USA reserves the right to go in and effect change, for which they mean regime change. It then goes on to discuss the rest of the world and says the world must be safe for US shipping, and it warns every African government they've got to be very careful not to offend the USA and not to make sure that all their minerals go to China or Russia or somewhere else. They've got to come to the USA. It's essentially a declaration of a permanent conflict with the whole globe being performed by the United States of America. It is the most extraordinary document. And so we're in an era now when international law has been completely torn up. We're in an era when the United States will decide what is international law. It will decide it's Pax Americana for the whole planet. And the arrest of oil tankers in international waters, the killing of people in international waters, is that seen as norm? And so in Europe, which was actually condemned by the national security strategy as a continent of liberal values, mass immigration and over-regulation, and that was about it. And they said sort of Europe doesn't matter anymore. The response has been very strange. The British government's response was, to begin with, Sir Keir Starmer said he needed more facts about the situation. I would have thought the fact of the president being arrested and hijacked out of the country was enough of a fact to decide what you'd have to do as a result of it. And they then went on to say that everything they do should be within international law. This is a man who is a human rights lawyer. So I would have thought he must have a pretty good idea that there's nothing legal about flying into another country and arresting the head of state and taking them out. Even in the previous wars that were fought illegally, such as Iraq and so on, they didn't do that until much later on. And so we're in very, very dangerous times. So apart from being angry and apart from being frightened about this, what do we actually do about it? We protest, we demonstrate, we demand, we challenge the media narrative on this whole thing. And we've been doing our best on that with the media in this country this week, in Britain, and indeed all over the world and all over Europe. But at a time where many people on the left feel frightened and depressed. They feel frightened by the rise of the populist far right across Europe and indeed in Britain as well, the way that MAGA has grown in the United States, and the way that ultra-nationalist forces have grown up in many societies. And they feel a bit frightened by that. That fear, unfortunately, doesn't have the effect of making people speak up. It has the opposite, where they get silent. What the left have got to be doing is demanding social justice, demanding an end to poverty, homelessness, demanding an end to rough sleeping, demanding an end to the numbers of people that have no alternative but to try and become refugees in another country. To be demanding policies all over the world that address the issue of environmental disaster and climate change, that address the issue of instability and insecurity. Give people hope by our actions. So our job is to analyze and understand, show the maximum solidarity to all those people under attack. Recognize, for example, the Palestinian people have nowhere to go, nowhere to hide, and no protection. All we can do is do everything we can to mobilize in support of the people of Palestine in exactly the same way as we mobilize in support of the people of Venezuela or any other country that's under attack from the United States. And so our job is understanding where all this comes from and understanding that we need to bring up the next generation to understand the cultural history that emboldens and empowers this ignorant far right in the USA and elsewhere to hoodwink whole populations into believing that the industrial powers have some God-given right to go into other countries around the world. They don't. It's up to us to offer something different. And that tonight is exactly what we're doing. Muchísimas gracias, Claudia, para esta noche y esta reunión.
Ayaya. Thank you. Compañero, hermano, Jeremy, as always, without any hesitation, being the leader that you are, in Latin America, as you have done for decades. The people that know your work know that you have stood with the people of Latin America for decades. It's not just yesterday, it's not just Venezuela, Chile, Bolivia, Argentina. You have done it for many, many years. For that, we are extremely grateful because we need leaders like you. We need many more Jeremy. Thank you so much, Jeremy. There is we have some good ample time so that we can go for another round here for this wonderful panel tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for putting your messages on the YouTube channel where we are live from today. I can read the sentiment across messages is concern as to where does this stop? And that will be our sort of main headline for the next round of comments and contributions from our panel tonight. I can also add that as Latin America, I'm of course fuming that Donald Trump is able to threaten a sovereign nation in Latin America to kidnap a head of a state, and that we don't have allied countries or many more countries, including the UK, who refuse to denounce it. So I want to hear from you. Many more, can you tell us perhaps more contributions that you can share with us around the concern that people have, or where does this stop and what can we do? Jeremy was sharing just now as to what we can do practically. We're also going to share the link to petitions that we putting together, including from your party, Peace and Justice Project, and from the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. I'm going to share those links with you. It's hugely important that all of you participate. But now back to the panel. What else can we do? Where does this stop? How can we stop that? Thank you so much. Who wants to go first? Please, Francisco.
I know there is an overall international context that we should be aware of.
You might be muted.
I'm not muted, am I? Can you hear me?
No, not yet.
Well, I can hear you, Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can hear me.
Yeah.
So we can come to how about now? Try.
Yeah,
I can hear him.
You hear me?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you as well.
Just go ahead, Francisco.
Right, thank you.
It was me.
I thought gone deaf. As I was saying, I think, there is obviously an international context where the United States plays a central role in being the negative influence in all sorts of ways. Nevertheless, these campaigns that we're trying to set up, which will obviously touch and discuss other issues, particularly the very grave situation that Cuba faces. It is the situation of Venezuela we want to concentrate on, and through that, we can widen it out to cover other issues. And that's why we in Venezuela Solidarity Campaign are very busy building the broadest possible coalition to oppose what has been done. And we managed to persuade, or it wasn't too much enough of an effort, to link up with the Stop the War campaign, which is a very mass organization, but also with CND. These are gigantic organizations. Then we're linking up, not exactly in the same way, because they have their own specificity, with the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, which actually share our platform when we organize it. So the question is, what exactly are the tasks? Well, the way we understand them. Number one, what we want to do is to maximize the number of MPs that actually openly and clearly and unequivocally have expressed condemnation of what is being done. And so far, 40 of them have actually come out, condemning the thing and signing our statement, which is sort of the center that rally things around. It's not the only possible initiative. So that's number one. To have 40 of them, which is quite extraordinary in the circumstances, allows us to actually maximize the pressure on the Prime Minister. I'll come back to that in a second. The second thing we have done is that we have so far 8 national general secretaries of national trade unions, plus plenty of other levels of regional trade union organizations all around the country. And we're asking them to do exactly the same, to endorse and to sign the statement, to put pressure on their local representatives, mayors, councillors, MPs, to actually join people like Jeremy Corbyn and Richard Bergen in order to ensure that they put pressure on this. So that's a crucial one. And this is directly saying, so far we got more than 5,000 signatures. So, and this is going to increase quite dramatically, much more. And this is going to aim exactly at pressurizing the Prime Minister. We have to ensure, whatever we may think about him, that he actually does what he's supposed to do. The Prime Minister of the UK has the constitutional, political, and moral responsibility to uphold international law, because the United Kingdom is signatory to the United Nations Charter. He has done every imaginable acrobatics to avoid this, and that's as an indication that we have pressure. Not that, the war revolution is going to take place if he were to condemn it, but we have to ensure that we put pressure on it, because by putting pressure, making the life of ministers and so on for not doing the right thing uncomfortable, then we weaken the possibility of supporting the United States. If we were to be able to persuade the United Kingdom Prime Minister to condemn the thing, whichever form, that would definitely be a thing. And there is plenty of possibilities around. If you look at the statements made by Democrat politicians in the United States, no illusions there on my part. And then the same with senators, even Republican members of Parliament, Congress, and the House in the United States. That's extremely important. People that belong to the Armed Services Committee, people that belong to the Intelligence Committee of these two houses of Parliament in the United States are absolutely scathing about what Donald Trump is doing. So it should be totally possible for somebody like Keir Starmer to do the same. And even better, as they say in London, the president of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, has signed a fantastically good statement jointly with Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Uruguay. I hope I'm not forgetting one. It's about 5 countries which are really
Colombia.
And Colombia. I'm so sorry, Oscar. Because you were smiling at me, you confused me, and I forgot Colombia. I saw you smiling, included it. But you're right, Colombia is quite a good one. So therefore, there is plenty of possibilities to do this. And then, of course, demand wherever you are, whatever association you belong to, whatever trade union you belong to, whatever body you belong to, even in your personal conversations, whatever you do, make sure that you demand that Starmer condemns it, and also demand the immediate and unconditional release of President Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores. And then, attend the January the 10th, the picket we're organizing. Let me just finish with this. We expected, when we organized the previous one, we expected to get something like 100 people. It was freezing cold. It was about -4. We got 2,000. And, that's a clear indication with 17 speakers. That was excellent. So we hope that this one is going to be much bigger, so that the President and the media covered the thing very intensely. I must have done, I'm sure others did the same, I must have done easily 15 to 18 impromptu interviews to God knows who. Everybody was there, asking everybody to make up. So that is the way to spread the thing as much as possible. And if you can, I hope I can put the plug in, if people should join the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francisco. And absolutely, we do need to know, and I think comrades appreciate when we know the places that we can go to as well for support, and that release statements, and that is supporting us with the tools that we need as well to denounce these illegal invasion of the USA in Venezuela. Thank you for the update that you tell us about how many general secretaries have signed up. We hope there are more coming as well. I want to actually go to Oscar to ask about also, what's happening in universities with the students and academics. How are they also denouncing what's happening? It would be really good to hear from you, and how also we can encourage more of this happening across the country, and for people that are watching us as well abroad, around the world. Thank you, Oscar.
Oh, this is very important, Claudia, because I'm sure everybody who is listening to us tonight would like to know that the importance of international law scholars does not reside in any sort of ivory tower or academic role that they may play. Actually, international legal scholars are practitioners also. Their voices become sources of international law. And for everybody in the profession, despite or regardless of their political identification, it is absolutely clear now, and it has been for quite some time, that the whole of the international legal order is in peril. That in fact, as Jeremy put it so well, the aim of the current U.S. administration is to do away with everything that has the whole world, including European countries, built after World War II. It is the UN Charter what has been violated. That very objective of saving future generations from the scourge of war, that is exactly what is at stake here. And let us be clear about this. We had a first historical opportunity back when the League of Nations tried to do something to stop war, at least in a part of the world. Well, we all know that failed. And then that led us to the second opportunity. After World War II, the countries of the world, and this time also including countries of the Global South, women and men, who participated in the drafting of the UN Charter, made sure to build a space where we could fight for peace. This is important right now. Let us not forget that Colombia, for example, is after 1st January of this year a member of the Security Council. We must use that scenario, which is the perfect scenario, the most appropriate scenario, to amplify our voices, which are not just voices on behalf of this or that government, but actually as voices on behalf of the international legal order that interests us all. That is what is at stake here. We can, from the universities, we can join voices with international legal practitioners and also with NGOs, with those who have a certain role in the different parts of the United Nations, because the United Nations, as you know, is also under attack. The International Criminal Court is under attack. The whole of the International Criminal Court, including its British, prosecutor, are under, sanctions by the United States. And that is an outrage. We need to put pressure on Keir Starmer, but we also need to raise our own voices from the universities, from the profession, and use those voices in scenarios like the Security Council and others. And finally, very important what both Jeremy and Francisco said about taking to the streets. I was in the occupied Palestinian territories back in early 2023. And I was in the house of a brave young man, Mohammed El-Kurd, a house who is actually, half of the house is occupied by so-called settlers. And he told us something that is very important to recall today. We don't want your sympathy. Your sympathy is not enough, is not sufficient. We want you to take to the streets of the countries you live in. We want you to vote into governments, people who would be able to raise their voices. We want you to do your revolution or your reform in your own countries. That is the way in which what is happening to us will be stopped. And this is also the case in the United States. As I said before, there is increasing concern in the United States because it's very clear that it's taking a non-democratic direction. And so we also need to join with our allies there. Just today, the U.S. Senate managed to advance a bill condemning the unilateral use of force by the U.S. executive. All those small steps are important because if they are put together, they will amount to a massive wall of resistance against this use of violence.
Thank you so much, Oscar. Absolutely spot on. And I wanted to add to that it actually was because of us, the people resisting, the people mobilizing, going on the streets, that the recent coup in Bolivia, we were able to return to democracy in record time. Although it was a very painful 10 months, we were able to do it because indigenous peoples went on the streets, grassroots movements, social movements, trade unions, Afro-descent communities, and every comrade here in the UK and around the world, they were being with us, accompanying us in that fight for democracy. So thank you so much. That is hugely important. And for us, when we were fighting for democracy, it was hugely, hugely important. Every mention, every condemnation of what was happening. And we need to do it today for Venezuela. We're now going to hear from Jeremy, who also wants to have something for us to hear from him. Thank you. Jeremy.
Very, very briefly, the UN has proved itself to be completely impotent in this at the Security Council level or elsewhere, but that's not a reason for not trying. It's not a reason for not using that platform. It's not a reason for not mobilizing around it. But over the last year, we had the case that went to the International Court of Justice from South Africa over the Genocide Convention. We had the International Criminal Court case. And next month, it will be 1 year since the decision of the ICJ, and the Hague Group, which we established on the basis of that, is holding an event in Amsterdam to commemorate that, but also to mobilize world opinion on this. And so it is about how we challenge at every possible opportunity. That means legally, it means with all international forums, as well as it means all the organization and so on the streets. And I was very interested in the public reaction in Britain on Venezuela. There seems to me, on a basis of very early opinion polls, to be a very large group of people, a majority in fact, who are opposed to the British government's do-nothing approach. And indeed, it's got rather worse because they cooperated with the arrest of some oil tankers over the past couple of days. And the last thing I'd say is this, that the US Senate vote today is, I think, of some significance, that despite everything that Trump has said and all the highfalutin language he's been using and all the bellicose behavior, he actually lost the vote in the US Senate on this. And that surely has to be an encouragement to people in the USA. And so it is about us building solidarity with popular movements in the USA, as well as all across Latin America and our country. So let's not allow national borders to divide us. Let's do the opposite. Unite across national borders.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. We're now going to hear, we have a few more minutes left. This being an incredibly powerful gathering, a briefing, emergency briefing. Thank you, Peace and Justice. Thank you, camaradas who are here today. And thank you to everyone who's watching and leaving also really, really humbling comments saying how you feel also that you're having some faith that we can join forces and we can turn this tide. Vijay, we're gonna conclude with you, and then we're going to also share with you the details of the rally that's happening on Saturday. May I just also say that, as Francisco said earlier, this was a very powerful rally that happened recently in sub-zero temperature. And it's the first time, I have to say, that I have ever swore in a speech. I was invited to speak. But I have to say that it came from the heart. It really came from the heart. To think of the faces of Trump and Starmer being complicit in the attack of my region, of my people, of Venezuela, of Latin America, is unacceptable. And we're not going to let that happen. I've seen I've seen enough. I've had enough of seeing bullets going through the peoples, campesino people, indigenous people, Afro descent. I've had enough. And we're not going to stop. We're standing together. Never again a slave, never again a colony. Thank you. Vijay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, I 100% agree with you. Enough is enough, and enough was enough a long time ago. Enough was enough 500 years ago. The Americas had to withstand the conquistadors. These are the Nueva Conquistadors, the neo-conquistadors, Mr. Trump and his friends, including Keir Starmer. I mean, I encourage people to go out on the 10th of January. I really encourage you to do that because, in fact, there are demands to the British state. This is not about going to Downing Street to say, do something to Trump. There are demands to the British state. Yvette Cooper said that the government of Keir Starmer would not ask the Bank of England to release the 1.4 billion sterling of gold that the Bank of England is holding, Venezuelan gold. And Yvette Cooper said, we can't do that unless there's a plan for transition to democracy in Venezuela. Come off it, guys. What democracy? Are you going to tell me about the great democracy of the United Kingdom, the democracy that you have in all those islands in the Caribbean? The islands like the Cayman Islands, like British Virgin Islands, Turks and Caicos, etc. I mean, be careful. Be careful, because Trump has said the whole of the Western Hemisphere is the United States. They're going to take all your tax havens. They're going to just walk in and say, okay, Montserrat, that's ours. Those are all British tax havens. They're all going to go. Okay, your non-dom people better watch out what you're not trying to stop. It's going to happen. I must say that there are demands to be made. And the first demand for the British people to make is to release the 1.5 billion sterling in gold that is held in the Bank of England. That should be released immediately to the Venezuelan people so that they can take care of their own basic needs. They can improve things. The list of things that Felix Plasencia sent for Francisco to read: housing, eyesight, the democracy of the stomach, the democracy of the roof, the democracy of reading. These things, 1.5 billion sterling can do a lot. Why is it sitting hostage? The gold is kidnapped by England. The president is kidnapped by the United States. Demand that the British Isles release the gold, and demand that the British Prime Minister and his foreign minister condemn the violation of Article 2.4 and also the violation of Article 21 of the Organization of American States. It's a violation of international law. The British people have a role in this. Please take your role seriously.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vijay. We're now going to, just as we close this very powerful evening, we're going to hear from Embajadora Ismara, because I think we look always at the Cuban people and the Cuban revolution with hope. I will be in Cuba in a few days' time, and I can't wait to be always in the land where I have family, and I admire the strength of la gente cubana, el pueblo cubano. Embajadora, la escuchamos.
Thank you so much, Claudia. I also want to reiterate my gratitude to all the speakers. And these are very tough times for Cuba, for Venezuela, for Latin America in general. So precisely for the difficulties we are facing, we are the ones who know that we have to stick together. And this is the moment when solidarity is more important than ever. And we should also fulfill our duties and continue spreading the truth, continue raising awareness in our communities, in our countries. So it's been really shocking, everything we've lived, everything we've witnessed in the last few days. However, even when we are sad, when we are disappointed, when we are angry, we have to think with our minds and with cold heads, and be sure of what we are going to do and how we are going to move forward. This is a moment for us to express our determination, but at the same time, it's a moment for joint action. If we act alone, we will not move forward in the right direction. So it's a decisive moment for the left around the world as well. So in Cuba, as you know, we are facing the direct impact of more than 60 years of blockade. And we all know what's the rationale behind that policy. That's the reason why for our people, defending socialism, defending the Cuban Revolution, defending social justice, solidarity, and internationalism is a must. So that is the principal position of Cuba, and that will continue to be the principal position of our government and our people. So we are sad, but at the same time, we have the strength of the company of so many friends, including the ones who have shared this session with us tonight. And that's why we have to continue side by side with the Venezuelan people. Thank you very much.
Hayaya el pueblo cubano, hayaya Venezuela, Venezuela no está sola, Latinoamérica no está sola. Thank you, everyone. Please, please look at the links that we shared on the chat, and you can also find us to join the Peace and Justice Project. We need support, we need to organize, we need to be collective, and together we are unstoppable. Please join, make donations as well if you can, because to organize, we also need the funds to do so. We're going to put the details of the rally for Saturday here on the screen, so you can take also note. We're also sharing the link in the chat for those following us there. And also we're sharing the petitions, which thousands of people have signed already, standing strong with Venezuela, standing strong with Latin America. Hayaya Venezuela, hayaya Latinoamérica, Venezuela no está sola, patria o muerte, venceremos. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Lee un mensaje que te envíe el chat, por favor. Oscar, lee el mensaje que te envíe